Hello, Mr. Fra Hughes. How are you?
I'm very good, brother. Thank you very much.
Okay, I want to ask about your activity, your educational background, and I think lately we have very vast news about the changing global politics who accelerate Palestine freedom. Before that point, I want to ask you about your environment because we don't know about Belfast. I don't know. I have to check it on website. Where is a Belfast? Where is a North Island? We know only about UK, yeah? London, etc., etc. Okay, tell me about your environment. Your
Okay,
stay
well,
where?
I was born.
Hmm?
Yep, I was just going to say, yeah, I was born in 1963 in
Hmm?
Belfast. And then 6 years later, we had our most recent bout of intercommunal and kind of cross community violence in
Hmm?
1969 when there was trouble in Belfast and in Derry. Uh, so I was really born into a violent society, really, when I was 6 years of age. It's all due to the continuing British interference in the internal politics of the island of Ireland. We are Great Britain's nearest neighbour. We were her first colony. And after 800 years, where I live in Belfast in the north of Ireland, is still under British judicial and parliamentary control. We still
Hmm?
have the British Army in barracks as an occupation army, in my view, in the north of Ireland. But we hope through the demographic changes on the island that the colonisers who have prevented the reunification of Ireland from 1921, when we
Hmm?
had a national war of independence, we will achieve national unity within the next 10 to 20 years.
Hmm?
So as I grew up, I asked questions why the British Army were on the streets of Belfast, why Irishmen were being incarcerated in jail without trial and without charge, which is very similar to the administrative detention that you
Hmm?
find in Israel against the
Hmm?
Palestinians, which was a law that was used under the British mandate when Britain was control of Palestine from 1917, 1918 on, after the collapse of the Ottoman Empire in the First World War.
Hmm?
So I asked why British troops were in Ireland, why Irish people were fighting for freedom, why our country was partitioned, why we had been partially colonized by
Hmm?
British, Scottish planters and settlers in the 17th century. And then I began to see parallels between the fight for Irish independence and the
Hmm?
right for sovereignty for the Palestinians and the right to have their own state and their own government and their own means of protecting their citizens. So I was in 1981. We had the hunger strikes here, and 10 men died. Bobby Sands was the first to die on the 5th of May after 66 days on hunger strike. He was elected as an MP to the British House of Parliament. At that time, Margaret Thatcher was the Prime Minister, and Bobby Sands received more votes than the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Margaret Thatcher, as a convicted member of the Irish Republican Army, as a felon incarcerated in a British jail on
Hmm?
Irish soil. So in 1982, I saw the attack on Beirut and the attack on Shabra and Shatia and
Hmm?
the massacre of the Palestinians who lived in the refugee camps after the PLO were forced to flee from Lebanon when they went to Tunisia and they went to other parts in the Arab African peninsula. And I've always seen uh, the parallels, and I've always had an affinity with the people of Palestine, because the only difference between what is happening in Palestine now and what has happened to the Irish people is just a time scale.
Hmm?
We had forced evictions in the 17th century. We had military occupation for 800 years, and we had a man-made artificial famine in 1847, which allowed the British to more or less put the Irish question on the back burner for 50 years, because that's
Hmm?
how long it took the
So,
Irish
okay,
people
wait
to
a minute,
recover
Mr.
from,
Yud.
from, from a man-made famine. Go ahead.
Okay, sorry. We don't know you. I cannot get your profile from website. So actually, you born from North Island. Original
Yes,
island?
yes, yes.
Original. Oh, and no, not connected with the Jews. No, not at all.
What's that?
Jewish people. Are you
No,
Jewish? No,
no,
Jewish. No. Oh no. Okay.
no, no,
So
not religious.
you mentioned the history of the Palestine, the history of Ireland and the British. So how do you know from the history of the book or from where? How you witnesses? Are you activist or what? I don't know. Tell me.
Okay, yes. Well, I saw the parallels between
Mm,
Ireland and Palestine, and we also had like murals in Belfast that
mm,
showed uh, two hooded figures, and
mm,
one had the Palestinian keffiyeh, and the other one had a Belfast balaclava, and they both held an RPG rocket, and it said IRA PLO one struggle.
mm,
So after the in about 2009, after the attack on the Mavi Marmara in 2010, if you
mm,
remember the flotilla of ships that left from Turkey to go to Gaza, it was attacked by the Israelis in international waters, and 9 people were murdered on that
mm,
boat, unarmed civilians. And from that, I became even more interested through social media when I went on Facebook and I
mm,
went on Twitter, and I became more, not politicized, but I became more informed about what's happening in the whole Middle Eastern region. So from that, I went on a convoy with George Galloway in 2010. We
mm,
left in September, and after 35 days, we arrived in Gaza on the 21st of October 2010. We were the first convoy to break the siege from the murder of the people on the Mavi Marmara. So from that, there were probably 400 people on the convoy, people from Malaysia, people from Australia, people from Indonesia, people from Ireland, people
mm.
from New Zealand and America and Great Britain. And when I came back, along with some other guys that I met on the convoy from Ireland, we formed
And also FIFA
charity.
Palestine, is it right? FIFA Palestine, is it right? Mavi
What's that?
Marmara and after that FIFA Palestine. FIFA
we
Palestine.
we founded we founded the charity Palestine Aid once we
Mm,
arrived back from Palestine, back from Gaza,
mm,
and subsequently from that we have raised over $50,000, which we have sent to Gaza, some for solar panels, some for educational scholarships, and most recently we have sent 28,000 US dollars from May 21 when,
mm,
if you remember, they bombed Gaza yet again in May 2021, and our charity had been kind of static for a while. It's difficult to continue to perpetually raise money. Well, we've sent $28,000 in the last, I don't know, 22, 23 months. So we're very proud of that. We're providing coats, school uniforms, shoes, food for iftar for people breaking their fast in Ramadan. We're currently trying to get some toys for children in Gaza, and we have people working on the ground. So from being in Gaza, so the follow on from that, there was the convoy in 2010. Then I went to the Viva Palestina summer camp in Beirut
mm.
at the American University in Beirut in 2011. In 2012, myself and my partner joined a Dutch delegation via the East Jerusalem YMCA, and we went
Mm.
on a guided tour, which
You
included
you have a convoy, is
Ramallah.
it right? From the Britain to Gaza with the convoy car, is it right?
We had a what?
Convoy car.
Yes, sorry. Yes, 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 absolutely. Yes,
Mm,
we brought a 13-seater
mm,
wheelchair accessible minibus. So we
mm,
donated that to the Al Alda Hospital in Gaza City, along with some medical equipment that was in the van. But it was more about breaking the siege
mm,
and showing solidarity with the people in Palestine and in Gaza. We actually wrote on the side of the minibus, "Tell the children of Jerusalem they are not alone." So that
mm,
was our kind of political statement to the people there. So, so in 2012, I visited the West Bank for the first time. In 2014, I went on a second convoy to Gaza, which was Bradford to Gaza, which was by Viva Palestina again. But that convoy only got as far as Amman. So in the first convoy, we went from Belfast, Dublin, London,
mm,
London, Paris, Paris, Lyon, then over the mountains, the Alps, and we went to Milan, and then we went to Ancona on the Italian coast, and from there we went to Thessalonica in Spain, and then Istanbul, and I think it was Ankara, and we stayed 15 days in Latakia in the Philistine Rumela refugee camp before we were given permission at that time by Mubarak and the Egyptian security services to travel on to Gaza. So in 2014, we followed a different route through Europe, but again, we went through Turkey and then into Syria. And because there was conflict in Syria, there was a war on Syria, there was ISIS in Syria, some people connected with the convoy weren't happy that they thought that we were supporting the Syrian
Suspend, yeah,
regime.
then
And
suspend,
it was
yeah.
actually,
Suspend,
what's
yeah?
it?
Cancel because of the conflict. Your activity has been cancelled or suspended. Is that right? Because of
No, we
the
continued.
continue?
We continued on. We went through Syria in 2014 at really the height of the war on Syria by the West and by Saudi Arabia and by their ISIS Turkish affiliates. There was actually a bomb on the main road going in Damascus. So we had one night in Tartus and we had another night in Damascus. And on the way into Damascus, there was a roadside bombing that killed many people doing the school run, people going to work. And we donated blood at one of the hospitals that was calling out for
it was in
blood donors.
2014, so right? It was 2014.
2014.
Oh.
Yep. So then in 2015, I was then invited to go to Damascus for the World Federation Trade Union Conference. That was in 2015, I think. And then I returned again in 2017 and 2019. And when I was there, I met people from the breakaway regions in the Donbass. And I was an election monitor in Donbass in 2018. So I've been to Donbass 3 times. I've been to Venezuela on a solidarity visit. I've been to the
Donbass
West
in
Bank
Ukraine,
three
you mean?
times.
Donbass in Ukraine, you mean?
Yes, brother.
In
Yes,
Ukraine?
100%. Yeah.
Ah, oh.
Yes, so I've been to Donetsk and I've been to Luhansk. I've been to Caracas in
In
Venezuela.
Donbass,
I've been in,
when? In Donbass?
we're in
What?
Donbass. I was in the city itself, Donetsk City, which is right on it's the DPR, that's the Donetsk People's Republic.
So
Capital city is
2015,
Donetsk.
2015 in Donbass?
No, 2000, and I think it was 2018, 2019. I was an election
Oh,
monitor.
oh, 2019.
I think so, yes. They had a referendum to elect their own government.
Oh.
And I was there as one of the election monitors.
Oh,
So I was in the
after that
city.
Russia admit the independence of Donbass, right? After referendum.
Yes, they admitted them in 2022, just after the special military operation began. They should have accepted them in 2014 when they first broke away, but Putin believed that that those areas would become autonomous within a federalized Ukraine, and he believed in the Minsk agreements,
Okay.
Minsk One and Minsk Two, which Germany and France had said that they would go guarantor. But as we now know, both Merkel and Macron have said that France and Germany and Ukraine never intended to implement the Minsk agreements. They used that as an opportunity to build up the Ukrainian armed forces.
Okay, after that you
retake.
moved to Venezuela, right? After from Donbass, moved to Venezuela.
Yeah, in and around the same time, maybe 2000. I think Ukraine was 2018, but it's easily Googled when they had the referendum. 2019, I was in Venezuela. I was asked to go on a solidarity visit and to bring in some seeds. I brought in a kilogram of organic carrot seeds because under the American sanctions, seeds were not allowed to be imported into the country. And the Venezuelans were trying to become food secure and self-sufficient, so they didn't have to import food because of the sanctions made it difficult. So I was there for, I think it was 10 days in Caracas. I met some government officials, and I went
Mm.
to, I think it's Karachi in the mountains, in the foothills of the Andes, where they had local farmer cooperatives, and they grew the food, and then it was supplied to the government under the CLAP program, and
Mm.
then the government subsidized that food to go into the barrios in and around Venezuela, so that people could get food at a cost that they could afford, because with the sanctions, the money was just hyperinflation. It was huge.
Okay,
Money was devalued.
very interesting, Mr. Hughes. You have been very, very active. So we want to know, because from the news that the people of Ireland, maybe in London too, support Palestine very strongly. Maybe other Europe country also, but focusing on the Ireland, they're supporting Palestine cause very, very strongly. But in the same time, the occupation of Palestine, the main actor is the British. So you live in there. You live in environment there. So tell me about the the people of the island or the people of London who support Palestine. Are you against your government or not? In case of Palestine cause.
Okay, well, I no longer believe in the Western democratic model. We don't
Mm.
really have a true choice between different candidates, different parties offering different policies. What we now have in most of Western Europe is the American system, where there is a pretense that the parties are on opposite polar political landscapes, that you couldn't slice a piece of paper between their policies when it comes to Syria, Yemen, Libya, Palestine, Iraq, Afghanistan, Venezuela, Russia, China, take your pick. So we do not live, we live in a false democracy. We live in a
Mm.
facade of democracy, but it is not a true reflection of what democracy should be, which is
Mm.
where we elect people on our behalf to represent our interests. When in fact, what we do is elect people who then represent the interests of corporations, the military industrial complex in America, and lobbyists and people who support political campaigns through huge donations. So I would like to believe that the majority of people in Ireland and the United Kingdom support the Palestinians.
Mm.
The problem is, because we are a Christian country, not as much as we were in the past. A lot of people still believe in the Bible. So priests and vicars will stand in the pulpit on a Sunday, and they will read from the Old Testament, and they will read from the New Testament, and they will tell us that God gave the land of Palestine to the Israelis, because
Mm.
that's in the Bible. So we have, on one hand, a religious sect that will support the Israelis, and because mainstream media here does not tell us the truth of what is happening on the ground, it does not show us the pictures of worshippers being attacked in Al Aqsa Mosque, women, children, and elderly men. Uh, we don't see the truth or the reality of what is happening on the ground. So, as such, people here are propagandized, and they are actually brainwashed into thinking that Israel is this plucky little Western type democracy that is facing a horde of hostile Arab nations, including the Persians and Iran, who want to push them into the sea. So you have huge governmental media propaganda. Then
Mm.
you have the other people who I believe are in the majority who support the Palestinian cause. In fact, there's a group in the United Kingdom called Palestinian
Mm.
Action, and they have targeted Elbit, the security company that works on behalf of Israel, and they have closed down some of their operations
Okay,
in the
okay,
United
Mr.
Kingdom.
Yot, are you trying to say that there is a paradox between Christianity as a religion and democracy, false democracy actually, and occupation? It's kind of paradox. Is it right?
Well, I'm just saying that the split in society, the divide between those who support Israel would normally be on the right wing. So
Mm.
this is people like Tommy Robinson and the fascists. Some people who once upon a time would have been anti-Semitic now
Mm.
believe Israel fights terrorism and is a strong bulwark against Islam.
Mm.
And people who were anti-Semitic are now becoming Islamophobic. I think Israel tries to change the narrative to say that the Muslims are the problems in the world. The Muslims are the danger to Western democratic values because of the fundamentalist nature of the ISIS followers.
Mm.
So, so there has been a turnaround uh, in how people perceive Israel on the right. So people who once upon a time would have been anti-Jewish and anti-Semitic are now all for Netanyahu. They're all for the settlements. A lot of these people are bought. A lot of these political
Do you
people
think
like
Christianity, do you think Christianity and in the British government officially support occupation of Palestine? Christianity.
I'm Yeah, well, I wouldn't go that far. Let's separate the government from the religion because it's
Mm.
supposed to be a secular government. But 100%, the government supports the occupation of Palestine. It
Okay, I see.
supports the state of Israel. It helped create, the British government helped create
Yes,
Israel
yes,
when
yes.
it
Sure.
allowed unqualified migration to Palestine. I know part of the history. I know that the first Zionist Congress was in Basel
But
in around 1890 in Switzerland. And
well,
from that, the Jewish National Fund in Great Britain was buying land in Palestine from 1901 on from absentee Ottoman Turkish landlords. So they bought the land from the Turks at a profit. They then put Jewish immigrants onto the land and refused to employ Palestinian Arabs and refused to assimilate into the new culture. So when people normally migrate to another country, if I migrate to America, I'm an Irish person in America. If I have children, they become Americans with Irish ancestry, but they are American because they're born in America and they assimilate into the culture. But when you have a foreign invading alien uh, group come to the land and refuse to assimilate and to then fly their own flags, to have their own religion, to have their own language. I doubt they have any culture because they are appropriating the Palestinian culture day by day. I see Israeli soldiers doing the Dapka dance. I see them wearing the keffiyeh. I see them trying to say that some of the Palestinian cuisine is actually Israeli because it's their country. You know,
okay, okay.
that white entitlement, that European colonial
Okay,
entitlement, that
okay.
not only can we take whatever
Let
we
me
want, but
clear, Mr. Hugh, let me clear.
yep,
The Christianity inside the people of British is, I think, support Palestine. Is it right? But the secular government of British Empire, yeah, support, yeah, occupation of Palestine. Is it right? Okay.
okay, okay. I would say yes. Most Western governments support the Israeli apartheid regime. Most churches believe that God gave the land to the Israelis, but
Mm,
not everyone in the Christian faith
I see. I see.
supports Israel. There are many who support Palestine as well.
Mm. Okay, about the democracy, let's talk about democracy. I think the government of the British in United States didn't admit democracy, which is running, yeah, in Gaza. You know that Hamas be a winner, yeah, in
Yes,
election, but they don't admit it.
through
It's kind of
2007.
paradox.
Yeah,
It's kind of
yes,
paradox.
yes, yes.
You mean like that? It's paradox between the
Yeah,
democracy. They admit the democracy.
yes,
They
yes,
say they
yes.
perform on democracy, but they don't admit it. It's opposite with their interest. Is that right?
Yes, there's an old phrase that says, "Do as I say, not as I do." So we
Mm.
all know that the Americans and the EU were pushing for elections in Palestine
Mm.
for in 2007, and that the people feel even more strongly today that the PA, the Palestine um, Authority, is nothing more than a collaborator with the security apparatus of the Israelis. And in fact, they have been accused of murdering Palestinian activists who have been against the occupation and against the PA. So they wanted the PA to be elected. They wanted Abbas to lead, but the people in Palestine voted overwhelmingly in favor of Hamas. So what they did was the Americans and the British said, we need someone who's elected. We need someone who's a democratic mandate that we can work with. And then when the wrong democratic mandate was elected, they then said, no, 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 forget democracy. Hamas is a terrorist organization. And they nullified the
Yes,
mandate
yes.
and the vote and the will of the Palestinian people, which led to Hamas taking over Gaza and the PA and Fatah, I assume, taking over the West Bank. But when you talk about British and American interference in the region, if we go back to the divide and conquer, which has been part of British military and governmental occupation throughout the world, Israel is there for one reason and one reason alone, and that is as a Western, white, European colonial settler colony that is there to divide the region so that European companies can continue to exploit the natural resources. And in fact, when Macron was in Africa recently, he's been chased out because France stands accused of actually destabilizing Burkina Faso and destabilizing Mali in order to, so they create the conditions for terrorism within the country. They then go to the government and say, we can protect your oil fields, we can protect your minerals and your mines. So you fight the terrorists, we protect your resources, that'll protect your income. And what in effect they're doing is keeping their monopoly of X.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Hughes. I think we have to limit this first segment, and then we can move to another segment. Thank you very much for this interview. Another segment, we would like to talk about your book and the global politics today. We accelerated to the Palestine independence. Thank you very much.